statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to start with something not usual. Today, on the 10th of February, is the Day of the Diplomat. It's a professional holiday. This is not invitation for congratulations. Quite the contrary. I would like to congratulate Mr. Voronkov, Ambassador Voronkov, who worked as a diplomat before he became a USG on counterterrorism. So congratulations and thank you. Thank you, Vladimir Voronkov and Michel Konex, for working effectively in your units in the monitoring and help to states under current challenging conditions. The global pandemic and the socio-economic upheavals related to that are used by terrorists to bring in an ever greater number of acolytes, and they use the internet for that. The ISIL is using the internet so as to manage their cells and fighting units and to spread their ideas. And we agree with the assessments made by the Secretary General on the threat presented by ISIL. We have that in the report. It shows that this terrorist organization continues maintaining its positions in a number of regions. Mr. President, the threat of ISIL is gaining a threat in this Sahara and the Sahel, in areas of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. The ISIL entities in the Greater Sahara are trying to create the Islamic Caliphate. Given that the fighters are gaining root in Central Africa, there's a threat that they will spread to southern African states. There is a difficult situation that we have now in the Mozambique, where we can see that the armed groups are trying to get hold of the gas fields so as to gain a source of funding. ISIL suffered a sizable defeat in Syria, but there is still a terrorist threat in that country, and it is first and foremost because of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. The main forces of that group has about 15,000 fighters. They are concentrated in Idlib, in western Aleppo, and in the northeast of Latakia. There is a serious threat in Syria through Huras ad-Din. They have 9,000 fighters, at least half of them foreign terrorist fighters from Middle East and Northern African countries. As regards Syria, there we have a fully fledged problem of foreign terrorist fighters and members of their family, especially minor children. Unfortunately, a whole slew of the states of origin of these people prefer to just close their eyes to this issue. And a very good example of this, so we have something that's been mentioned in the Secretary General's report for years, and namely the Al-Hol camp. The states whose nationals are in the camp have to have interactions with the legitimate authorities of Syria so as to resolve this. The Russian Federation cooperates closely with Syria and Iraq so as to determine their location and return their minors back to the country. At the end of December, 19 children were returned from Syria, aged from 3 to 15. Since December 2018, 274 children were returned to Russian Federation from conflict areas, 122 from Iraq and 152 from Syria. We currently have the paperwork ready for 96 children who are currently in refugee camps in Syria. And we call upon states to make every effort to make sure their children are not involved in the cycle of violence propagated by terrorists. Mr. President, it is equally important to have full cooperation with states on which territories crimes were committed so as to bring FTFs to account. Instead of that, what we are witnessing is attempts by a number of countries to create quasi-legal mechanisms in cooperation with people and entities which have no right to dispense justice. And we also need to be talking about the problem which is created by Western special services, a pseudo-humanitarian organization, that is, which are being used in order to provoke and foment conflict instead of pursuing the laudable goals they proclaim. And the sad example here is Jabhat al-Nusra, very closely linked to terrorists in Jabhat al-Nusra, the White Helmets, that is. The funding of that organization continues. It is notable that after the ISIL suffered defeat in Syria, the representatives of the White Helmets were deployed to other countries with the promises by their Western mentors to take them in. But this has taken a long time. There is a danger here that these so-called humanitarians can inspire terrorist activities in their new location. Mr. President, still ISIL continues strong in Afghanistan, which helps spreading of the terrorist and drugs from Afghanistan to the countries in the region and beyond. And despite the efforts made by the national security forces undertaken with the assistance and participation of foreign military contingent, unfortunately, the situation currently does not look like it's moving towards stability. Speaking of combating terrorism in Afghanistan, we need to recall the crimes committed in that country by members of foreign military contingents, and these crimes need to be investigated and perpetrators brought to account. Mr. President, in conclusion, I would like to say that combating ISIL does yield fruit. We today are no longer talking about a terror caliphate. But the group is trying to adjust to the new conditions, and the threat that they emanate is real. Terrorists use the fact that there is a lack of unity among states, that there are varying opinions amongst them. ISIL, we need to remember, stems from illegal use of force within a country by a foreign state and illegal supplies of arms. The states, under the leading role of the UN, should show that they're united under the commitments they have under Security Council resolutions and international conventions and set everything else aside. Helping with building on success in combating ISIL is also the goal of UN entities and its programs. The report, however, notes the priority of human rights and gender aspects in UN programs and initiatives. Of course, naturally, these are important topics, but we have to maintain the balance of approaches on the basis of what we have in the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his